Thank you. Good evening. Tonight's Committee of Adjustment hearing is being held by video conference and live streaming video on the town's live stream webpage at oakville.ca. This is a hearing to consider applications for minor variance and consents held under the authority of the Planning Act. Please keep in mind the intent of this process is to review the application that is before the committee, listen to the evidence, and then make a decision. This process is not intended to be used to resolve any concerns or disputes that may exist between the town, individuals, or organizations. If a request for deferral is made and the committee grants such a request, the applicant or authorized agent must contact the Secretary-Treasurer to schedule a new hearing date. In order to conduct an effective and efficient electronic hearing, we have adopted the following process. If you are watching the live stream of this hearing on Oakville.ca and you wish to speak to an item on the agenda, you can call 905-815-6095. Again, the number is 905-815-6095. The number will also be posted below the live stream page at Oakville.ca. Staff will be standing by to take your call. When you call in, staff will ask for your name and an item number that you wish to address and your telephone number. Further instructions will be provided for you to call back to join the video conference. When the chair of the committee polls for interested parties, you will have to press *6 to unmute yourself. The applicant or agent will then be given the opportunity to briefly explain to the committee the basis of the application, answer any questions that may arise. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided for a presentation. You will need to state your full name and address for the record, and any submissions beyond the 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the committee. All delegations must also state their full name and address for the record. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided for each presentation. All remarks and questions are to be directed to the chair. Any submissions beyond the 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the committee. The applicant, agent, or any other person provided for the further 5 minutes to respond to the comments made by interested parties and answer any questions for the committee members. If the applicant or agent has any concerns particularly found in staff reports, that will be the time to advise us. The matter will then be taken into committee for a decision and it will mark the end of all discussions. Any person desiring a notice of the decision for an application must provide a written request, preferably through email, to the Secretary-Treasurer. Written notice of the committee's decision is to be mailed no later than 10 days for minor variance and 15 days for consents to the applicant, agent, and any other person who has filed a written request for such notice. The last date to appeal the decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal will be noted on the decision. Only the applicant, specified persons, or public bodies may appeal the committee's decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal. In November of 2022, Bill 23 legislation, the More Homes Built Faster Act, amended the Planning Act to remove appeal rights for members of the public. If no appeal is received within the prescribed timeframe, the decision of the committee becomes final and binding, and the Secretary-Treasurer will then notify the applicant and anyone who has received a copy of the decision through written correspondence. People participating in this hearing are to be courteous to and respectful of the members of the committee, town staff, and any other person participating in this electronic hearing. Tonight's electronic hearing is being video recorded and available for future viewing at oakville.ca. Thank you. Okay, we have no regrets this evening. At this time, I'll take declarations of pecuniary interests. Go ahead, Mr. Talowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'm going to declare a conflict on CAB 174 at 412 Silver Maple. The applicant is a related company to my employer.
Thank you, Mr. Talowski. Any other? I see none. Thank you. Madam Secretary-Treasurer, I'll now take requests for deferrals or withdrawals of applications. Anyone in the audience who seeks to withdraw an application or defer the application to speak to town staff may do so at this time.
Madam Chair, I have one agent with their hand up, so I will move them into the meeting.
Sure.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee.
Good evening, Mr. Van Kulen. Go ahead.
My name is Curtis Van Kulen, representing CAVA 169 2024 at 2114 Hickson Street, requesting a deferral to work with town staff and better our application and come back later. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, all those in support of a deferral? Okay, your application has been deferred. You'll see the Secretary Treasurer at your earliest convenience.
Yes, thank you all.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You as well.
Anyone else, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
No, I see no one else with their hand up.
Okay. Okay, we'll start with the first item on our agenda. It's CAV 158 of 2024 at 25 Lambert Common. Again, this is CAV 158 of 2024 at 25 Lambert Common. I have RJ CAD Solutions.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Committee of Adjustment members. My name is Krutisha from RJ Solutions. I'm representing on behalf of my client for application number CAVA 158/2024. This is regarding 25 Lambert Common, Oakville. We are going for minor variance for 2 points. Number one is to reduce the minimum area to 8.6 meter, wherever 10.5 meter is required, and increase the maximum encroachment into the minimum area for uncovered access stair below grade to 3.2 meter, where it was 1.5 meter required. I think this is minor in nature and there is no drain problem for the neighbors. The application has been supported by the zoning department. So if any question, please ask.
Thank you. Do the members have any questions for Ms. Shaw at this time? Madam Secretary Treasurer, have we had any calls with interest for this application?
No, Madam Chair, there have been no calls.
Very well, then we'll take the matter into committee. Who would like to move a motion? Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having undertaken my site visit, having reviewed the materials, including the written staff report, and having heard the presentation from the agent, I am prepared to put forward a motion of approval, finding that the requested variances conform to the 4 tests of the Act. The motion will be subject to conditions, those being that the below grade entrance be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevation drawings dated 2024-10-10, and that the approval will expire within 2 years of the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued.
Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Is there discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved. None opposed. Thank you and have a good night.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Good night.
Next item on our agenda is CAV 167 of 2024 at 20 Belvedere Drive. Again, this is CAV 167 of 2024 at 20 Belvedere Drive. I have Joe Dong here as the agent.
Yes, my name is Joe Dome, 133 Torresdale Avenue, agent for the owner.
Okay, go ahead.
The owner would like to legalize a cabana constructed beyond the limits of a building permit. One variance is requested for lot coverage of 27.32%. As noted in the planning staff report, the cabana replaced a previous detached garage and is constructed entirely on the existing garage slab, no longer visible from the street, minimizing impact. No setback variances or height variances are requested. 4 doors away, 38 Belvedere was approved for a lot coverage of 27.68%. Providing further mitigation is the fact that the garage had a taller overall height due to having a peaked roof, whereas the cabana has a flat roof around 8 feet lower than the previous roof peak. Excuse me, planning staff have no concerns with the application, and overall we feel the application is quite reasonable and minor in nature, and I'd be happy to answer any further questions you may have.
Thank you. Do any of the members have questions or items of clarification, Mr. Dome, at this time? Okay, I see none. Madam Secretary Treasurer, has anyone called with interest for this application?
No, Madam Chair, no calls.
Very well. Then we'll take the matter to committee, and who would like to move a motion? Okay, go ahead, Mr. Dickey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Based upon my review of the owner's application, site plans, the building elevation, my site visit, the planning staff's report, and the submitted objections, I'm satisfied that the variances are minor in nature and conform to the 4 tests under the Planning Act. We put forth a motion that the application is applied for be approved, subject to the conditions that the cabana be constructed in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevation drawings dated 2024-09-23, and that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision. The building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction.
Thank you, Mr. Dickey. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? Seeing none, all those in support? Okay, the application has been approved. None opposed. Thank you. Have a good
Thank
night.
you very much.
We are looking at application CAB 168 for 78, 80, and 82 Trafalgar Road. Again, this is CAB 168 of 2024 for 78, 80, and 82 Trafalgar Road. If anyone has interest in the application, please call 905-815-6095. Good evening, Mr. Ozamora.
Good evening, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
So, good evening, committee members. I am Sebastian Altamara with Glenschnar Associates Incorporated, and we are the planning consultants for the registered owners of the lands municipally known as 78, 80, and 82 Trafalgar Road. Our client is seeking relief from the zoning bylaw to facilitate the development of 3 townhouse units as shown here on the slide. We thank staff for the review and comments on the application, as we are agreeable to the comments provided in the recommendation report. Next slide, please. To provide some background, the subject lands are generally located south of Robinson Street and west of Trafalgar Road, as shown in this aerial image. The total site is approximately 0.06 hectares, as delineated by the red boundary line. The subject lands are generally surrounded by residential and commercial uses. A 4-story apartment building is located directly north of the site, while single detached residences are located to the east, west, and south. A commercial plaza is located northeast of the site. Next slide, please. As you can see in this slide, construction of the proposed development is well underway. Here's a street view of the front elevations of the proposed townhouses looking west from Trafalgar Road. Next slide, please. The subject lands are zoned as residential medium special exception 50, which permits residential uses including townhouse dwellings. The proposed development generally maintains the intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. Next slide, please. So the owner received site plan approval for the concept you see here on the screen back in August 2023. The site plan approval was granted on the basis that the proposed development complies with the official plan and zoning bylaw regulations that are in effect. The applicant has also received approval for a common element condominium application on October 8, 2024. Currently, the site is considered one legal lot. As part of the conditions in the terms agreement between the town and the owner, the site needs to be in compliance with the zoning bylaw following the creation of the 3 legal lots. Next slide, please. So the proposed wording of the minor variance is shown here on the screen. In summary, we are seeking relief from section 6.10C of the town's bylaw, which states that in the case of common element condominiums, the in effect zoning will still apply to each of the 3 respective lots rather than the entirety of the site. We note for the benefit of the committee that the wording of the variance request shown on the screen was agreed upon by the owners, planning, and legal staff at the town. Further, the wording of the variance was provided in the executed terms agreement, which was signed by the owner and the town for the issuance of the formal site plan approval. I also note that under the executed terms agreement, it was agreed by the owner and the town that a part lot control application will be required, which is currently under review with town staff. Next slide, please. To provide additional clarification, the proposed lots and the townhouse units within these lots will not conform to some of the zoning regulations in a post-lot creation scenario. So this request can be seen as a blanket variance to cover any deficiencies under the zoning bylaws that may arise as a resultant of the 3 created lots. This variance considers no changes to the concept that has already been approved through the site plan application, as it is entirely technical in nature and it deals with future lot creation. While we obtain site plan approval for 1 legal lot in a post-lot creation scenario, there would be 3 legal lots and the in effect zoning bylaw will apply to each of these 3 lots. This forms the basis of the variance before the committee today. Next slide, please. So we are of the opinion that the variance meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act to authorize the minor variance. And that is all for my presentation. I'd be happy to respond to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? Mr. Dickey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to know what elements that this project doesn't comply to. Like, I assume it doesn't comply to the rear yard setback because you have a common element driveway back there. But could you just go through what else, what the other items are that it doesn't comply with the zoning bylaw?
Certainly, to be fair, the minimum lot frontage for the site is 30.5 meters. So we wouldn't be able to have townhouse units with 30.5 meter frontages. So it would also cover that deficiency. In addition to, there's our site would be subject to minimum interior side yards, which we would need relief for these townhouse units. And those are the deficiencies that we would be addressing under this variance.
That's it, just those 2 items?
For the chair, yes, that is my understanding. Those are the items.
Are townhouses not permitted in that zoning? All townhouses would have a 0 side yard setback on street townhouses, for example. I'm just surprised when you say interior side yard. Just elaborate a little bit more as to why that's a concern.
So through the chair, we had historically received minor variance relief on a separate application, and based on my understanding, because we were approved for a site plan, we could be subject to these provisions, and so it's my understanding that this minor variance would relieve us from the interior side yard setbacks.
I think Ms. Cockburn would like to comment.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So through you to the member, there is a regulation for side yard setback where the end of the townhouse block abuts the property line. So through you, Madam Chair, the applicant's presentation had indicated red lines where it would be the dividing line or the party wall of each unit. You 100% are correct, that would be 0. But this, as you know, in the staff report, there was a demarcation of the common element roadway, and that creates a new side yard setback that abuts the end of the block. That is where that 1.2 meter side yard setback would no longer be able to be accommodated, because the ensuing registration of the condo would create that new lot line. So it essentially creates 0 lot line development, if you will, on that side, rather than providing the relief of the 1.2 meters needed. So that is why the variance as structured provides for blanket coverage to ensure that we are reflecting upon the original perimeter of the property and not trying to capture the variety of variances that would be needed based on the new perimeter, being the boundary within that common element roadway.
Mr. Dickey, you still have questions?
You use the word variety of variances. I got the impression in the planning report you were using the words variety of variances. So when I ask the question, I'm only told about 2 variances: frontage and side yard setback. So I'm just surprised that these weren't mentioned when the applicant made his application, exactly what the problems were, what the items were. And similarly to the town planner, those weren't mentioned. Now, I'm interested in what they are. I only imagine the neighbors would have been interested also. So I'm a little bit, that's why I was surprised. You talked as if there was more variance.
Through you, Madam Chair, to the committee member, there were 2 paths are 2 options to pursue an application in front of the committee in terms of ensuring compliance with the bylaw to reflect what has been constructed to date on site. One path would have been to have variances that would have reflected the new lot line and the division of what is the common element roadway and its portions, so parking, or access to parking, landscaping components that it provides for the site as a whole, as well as the setbacks, in addition to what the remaining portion would be, which is where the townhouse blocks are. That deals with the setback to the block, that deals with the frontage of the overall parcel of land, which the applicant has indicated to you this evening, as well as the overall lot area, I believe. So the effect of providing tenure, the application for condominium, albeit will be part of a part lot control application, and these lots will inherently be connected to that common element. The effect of a condo application does create a new lot line. That is what it is doing in its action. The zoning bylaw, in that instance, will have to recognize that new lot line. The nature of the variance, the other path, which is what is before you this evening, is to pretend that that lot line doesn't exist and that we are looking at the property as a whole, as it was approved for development.
Okay, I understand all of that. I understand completely common element condominiums, etc. What I was extremely disappointed in is, as I said, it wasn't outlined at any time as to exactly how it didn't comply. In other words, does it comply with the front yard setback? I understand it doesn't comply with the rear yard setback because the driveway at the back is a common element. I would have appreciated if that was written in some of the documents that are on record. Now I understand the applicant, the consultant, talked about the frontage. I understand what he's I totally understand that. Why wasn't that simply mentioned in some of the documents that are on record? That's what I'm disappointed in. I think the neighbors, everybody else deserves an explanation on record as to what those problems were. don't get me wrong, I don't have a problem with the actual wording of the variance. Because if we go out and give up zero side yards variances and everything like that, I can understand that, but what I wanted, or what I would have appreciated, is if it was written in either the planning report or the agent's letter that was submitted 2 weeks. That's what I'm upset about. Anyhow, thank you very much.
Any further comments or items of clarification? Okay, see none. Has anyone called with interest for this application, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
No, Madam Chair, there have been no calls.
Okay, then we'll take the matter into committee. Who would like to move a motion? Start the discussion. Go ahead, Mr. Tulowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, this is clearly a technical variance caused by tenure to deal with an existing building. So, and on that front, I'm satisfied that there's going to be no impact from the variance that's being requested. The building complied when it applied for a building permit, and all we're doing is adjusting the way the zoning is determined as a result of the tenure for the common element condominiums. I believe that there will not be an impact, again, to this existing structure. I believe it meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act. So I would move approval of the application as applied for with no conditions. And I would note that there's no objection from the community.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tulowski. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to quickly state that I would agree with Mr. Tulowski's commentary on this. This is a technical variance, no perceivable impacts of change in tenure, so I'll support the motion on the floor.
Thank you. Okay. All those in support of the motion support the application as applied for with no conditions. The application has been approved, none opposed. Thank you.
Thank you.
CAV 170 of 2024 at 324 Spruce Street. Again, that's CAV 170 of 2024 at 324 Spruce Street. Go ahead, Mr. Carothers.
Good evening, Madam Chairman and members of the committee. My name is David Carothers from Carothers and Associates, Inc. of 505 York Boulevard in Hamilton, Ontario. I am here as the agent on behalf of the owners, Carolyn Best and Jeremy Hammond, to ask for approval under subsection 45 of the Planning Act for the one variance outlined in the consolidated report. I've read through the planning staff report, which includes the following. Planning staff, no objections for the development, no objections from the region and outside agencies. And as part of our application, I've provided a justification report outlining our ideas and reasoning behind our minor variance requests. Number one, does the variance meet the intent and purpose of the official plan? The subject property is designated low density residential of the livable Oakville official plan. The intent of the low density residential is to facilitate a range of permitted low density housing types, including a single detached dwellings. The proposed dwelling has been designed to be complementary with recent and existing development forms in the neighborhood, including similar features, providing a high quality character design. Given this, the proposal will provide a built form massing that will integrate with the established heritage and transitioning neighborhood. There are no natural heritage features on or adjacent to the subject property that will be adversely impacted by our proposal, as the home will stay well within the required building setbacks, and the building height is well within zoning regulations. The variance requests represent a minor departure from what is currently permitted while meeting the intent of the OP. Is the variance desirable for the appropriate use of the land? Approval of the minor variance will allow for the proposed development and reinvestment on the subject lands, which are in close proximity to transit and various town amenities. It is my opinion that the new dwelling has been designed and will maintain compatibility with the surrounding area and will be in keeping with the current streetscape character and massing. The variance will help facilitate additional living space without creating any excessive additional massing or negative impacts on any neighboring properties. Is a variance minor in nature? The requested variance will permit the construction of a home project on the subject lands and represents a minor departure from what is currently permitted. The variance is consistent and compatible with the existing and transitioning community built form character. And finally, does the variance meet the intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw? So the request here is we're asking for 25.96, where a maximum of 19% is allowed. The general purpose and intent of the zoning bylaws to implement the policies of the OP through specific permissions and regulations. In our case, our 3-0 SP10, the low density residential regulates the maximum lot coverage to prevent a dwelling from having a mass and scale that it is larger than the dwellings in the surrounding area. It's important to note that although we are asking for an increase in lot coverage, our residential floor area remains under the maximum limit, and the requested lot coverage includes a main level front covered porch, which the bylaw requires to be included in the area. In the case of the subject lands, the actual proposed house is 21.24 and the front covered porch is 3.40. Being an integral part of the home design in this area, the porch allows for the roof slope to extend down to the main level, helping provide a 1.5-story appearance from Spruce Street. The porch complements the heritage character of the neighborhood streetscape while providing relief to the overall massing of the dwelling. In addition to the house and the porch, we're asking for 1.32% of the lot coverage for future detached shed in the rear yard, as this home, again, trying to be heritage and complement the area, doesn't have an attached garage, and this space would be used for future garden tools and things of that nature. So in conclusion, as described above, the requested variances will allow for reinvestment to occur on the subject lands in a manner that is compatible and in keeping with the current streetscape in the neighborhood. And in my opinion, the requested variances satisfy the 4 tests of the Planning Act and represent a good design. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions or items of clarification? Okay, I see none. Has anyone called with interest for this application, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
No, Madam Chair, no calls.
Very well, and we'll take the matter into committee. Who would like to move a motion? Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having undertaken my site visit, having reviewed the materials, including the written staff report, the drawings, and having heard the presentation, I am satisfied that the requested variance conforms to the 4 tests of the Act. To put forward a motion of approval. The proposed dwelling is sympathetic and similar to the character found elsewhere within this neighborhood, and the coverage being proposed is consistent with other variances we've seen in other built form we've seen in the area. So I believe that this is consistent and compatible in addition to addressing the 4 tests. The motion will be subject to conditions, those being that the dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevations dated October 17th, 2024, and the approval will expire within 2 years of the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued. We would note that there were no members of the public present with respect to this matter.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Is there discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed.
Great, thank you, Madam Chairman. Members of the committee, have a great evening.
Have a good night. Application CAV 171 of 2024 at 115 Glen Ashton Drive. Again, that's CAV 171 of 2024 at 115 Glen Ashton Drive. I have Jason Scott here listed as the agent.
Good evening. My name is Jason Scott, a representative of Four Seasons Sunrooms, 240 Viceroy Road, speaking as agent for the owners of 115 Glen Ashton Drive. Next slide, please. The proposed project is a single-story rear addition to the dwelling. We have a letter of non-objection from the adjoining neighbor for both the addition itself as well as the construction process. The variance being requested is a reduction in rear yard setback of 0.58 meters from 13 to 12.42 meters. Next slide, please. Our clients, just a background information, our clients are lifelong Oakville residents. The current residence was purchased in 2011, specifically because its orientation made it ideal for future use as an art studio. Carolyn is an artist and an art teacher with a close relationship to the local art community. Proposed addition is to be used as her art studio, and if approved, brings her dreams to fruition. The highlighted area is the noted portion that planning has addressed issue with, being zero side yard setback to the neighboring property. The project entails minimally disruptive construction elements for both neighbors. We're using Technopost foundation. There's no excavation, no basement. Both left and right elevations are solid walls, no windows, fire rated with non-combustible cladding. The structure poses minimal shading, being only a single story, and no privacy concerns for adjoining properties. The lack of excavation and details of the build produce minimal grading or drainage issues. Next slide, please. The property itself, while requesting 0.58 reduction in rear yard setback, actually only is projecting beyond the neighboring properties by 0.3 meters. All properties on the street are deeper in dimension than this piece, the property in question. We feel that the nature of the proposed project, both in design and purpose, supports the general motivation of the community plan. The reduced setback being only 0.58 meters and the overall projection beyond the neighboring properties of 0.32 meters is minimally invasive. Next slide, please. I had a meeting on Monday evening with a representative of the planning department to address their concerns. The connected neighboring property is of no objection to both the build and the construction process. Next slide, please. When it comes to the 4 tests, the general nature of the build essentially complies with all 4 requirements. It's a minor concession on the city's part, only 5.58 meters. The community plan, the general intent of the purpose of the zoning bylaws, and the general purpose of the official plan. It's a small addition on the back of a property to be an art studio for a local resident. Next slide, please. In order to save time, I think it's logical to open up to questions right now. I think everybody's aware of the project.
Okay. Mr. Scott, there was another letter of objection from 110 Roxton Road, so I believe those are behind. Or is it? Let me check.
I took a Google image of where the property in question is located. I got the letter today, and I don't believe there's any even visual connection to the client's property.
Okay. The third, the 3D rendition that you have, is that expected to replace the porch that's outside, or?
Yes, the back of the property. At the back of the property, the intent of the proposal is to remove the section of fence where the building will be, and the addition will be on the back of the property from the adjoining neighbor over to the edge of the building on the neighboring side.
And when you say sunroom, but it's going to be an art studio, I'm assuming it will be heated, so it can be used all year round?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Those are my questions.
Yep, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say the preliminary drawings show the heating plan as well.
Any questions for the applicant, Mr. Talowski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Scott is looking at the air photo. Clearly, if there's an opportunity for an extension, it would be these units, as they seem to be shorter than the abutting units on either side. But as I read the staff report, and I'll ask staff to clarify, but I don't think they're objecting to the variance in the side or the rear yard as much as we tie the variances to the drawings permitted, and I believe they're objecting to that they don't believe it's desirable to create this addition with a zero setback because of construction and maintenance issues. And I guess you've suggested that there's the construction method doesn't require you to go onto the adjoining property and excavate, but how do you address the maintenance concern when there's a zero setback and your client has no right to access the adjoining property?
Well, in the case of the current residents, they have a clear agreement with their neighbors that there's no issues at all. There's no objection to both the build and the future challenges that may arise. Going beyond that to address planning's concern that for future, if somebody sells their property, there is a general acceptance that when you have a semi-detached home, there are certain concessions that have to be made. Fences that are owned by both parties, and I've worked on projects that have an addition on the back of the property of a semi-detached home where the client doesn't have an addition and there's, they might need access. It's a generally accepted challenge that arises when you have a semi-detached property. So a potential client moving in that might purchase the neighboring property, when you're buying a semi-detached home, there's an understanding that you have a bit of a relationship with your neighbors.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chair, if I can ask Mr. O'Hare if I'm interpreting staff's concerns correctly here, that it's not really the 0.6 meter difference, but it's the appropriateness, desirability of creating this situation with a zero setback. Is that correct?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair, to the member Talowski. That is correct. Unfortunately, the as of right zoning under the bylaw already allows for an undesirable situation to be built. When I had met with Mr. Scott on Monday, he had mentioned that, had this application not come forward to Committee of Adjustment, had they filed a building permit application with a sunroom that was in full compliance with the zoning bylaw, they wouldn't have to go through this process, through the minor variance process. And the as of right zoning unfortunately does allow for this undesirable situation to be built. The magnitude of the variance request itself is not as much of a concern, since the applicant's only requesting a reduction to the minimum required rear yard setback of 0.58 meters. But again, based on the 4 tests under Section 45(1) of the Planning Act, the application submitted does not meet that desirability test. And also regarding the abutting neighbor providing their consent to allow the applicant onto the property for access and maintenance purposes. Of that sunroom wall that has the zero setback to the side lot line, there are no easements currently on title in favor of the applicant for encroachment or access purposes. So yes, although there is a situation in effect now where it seems that the neighbor at 113 Glen Ashton has allowed them access onto their property, without an easement in place, there is no guarantee. I understand situations with semi-detached or townhouse units with fencing and other sort of issues that need to be resolved with replacing fences, but you don't have to access your neighbor's property and walk on it. If you hire a contractor to do the work, it's done together, without having the homeowner trespass or walk on or access the property. So that was the major concern from zoning, and we had spoken with Mr. Scott too about potentially moving, this sunroom inward to the property a little bit. So a standard variance or standard bylaw requirement for accessory structures in a rear yard is to have a 0.6 meter setback from an interior side lot line. So we had discussed that as a possible solution to address planning's concerns. And in lieu of perhaps a lost square footage that would have been as a result of that, because 115, the rear main wall is so set back from the neighboring dwellings that there was a little bit of room to negotiate to extend it a bit further to make up for some lost square footage. But ultimately, the applicant and homeowner requested to proceed as is, and that's kind of where we are now.
Thank you.
Speaking as somebody who has had general contracting experience for 24 years and having worked on properties downtown Toronto and in other areas where semi-detached homes have had various additions put on over the years, I respect planning's concerns, but ultimately, in my experience, the procedures in place and the standards in place with homeowners has not arisen any issues in my past when it comes to access for minor maintenance on the exterior of a home. And the exterior finish is also, the likelihood of any exterior work to be done on the home is minimal, whether it's stucco or whether it's aluminum siding. The exposed building face in question is low maintenance.
Go ahead, Mr. Dickey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kind of more like a question to the other members. It's my recollection that a few months ago we had a very similar situation. I believe it was a couple of blocks south of Dundas. I can't remember if it was off the 3rd line or it was over by 6th line. Exactly the same thing. It was either a semi or a townhouse, an end unit of a townhouse, and they were building a 1-story addition. And this is why I'm asking the questions to the other members of the committee. My recollection that we voted against that for exactly the same reason, that they didn't have a side yard setback, but we thought that was necessary for maintenance, etc. And I just, if any of your members remember you remember that? Did we actually vote against it, or did we vote for it? Anybody remember better? I should have looked.
I don't think that's appropriate because we have to take each application on its own merits.
This is sorry, I apologize for interrupting, but this is also a semi-detached property. It does pose different situations than a townhouse property.
Regardless, I'm still with Mr. Telsky on this matter. He didn't push it any further, but I will. Given the town's cooperation and their willingness to negotiate, you could have had the same outcome by moving this development a little bit, and you wouldn't have the issue that we're facing right now with a potential issue in the future, regardless of how many years of experience you've had in the business and regardless of how you feel about it. You don't have a crystal ball for the future and the future of this property. So my question to you is, why not?
Why didn't we make a change?
Yeah.
Following our meeting on Monday, we immediately started producing the required elevations and site plan changes on the basis of having the discussion with our client. And ultimately, our client made the decision with weighing all the options that based on what they want to use the space for and based on their relationship with their neighbor, that they chose to move forward with the application as is.
Okay. Any further
questions? The space was such that the increase in depth was contrary to using their backyard for the event purposes, losing more space in their backyard and having a 60-centimeter alley down the side of their addition didn't suit their needs. So they chose to move forward as is. Okay. And as representatives of our clients, we have to weigh all the options.
Fair enough. Any other questions or items of clarification? Mr. Talowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to address Mr. Dickey's comments, not in the sense of comparing applications, but the issue that arises in many applications and is similar here. And that is, if the applicant complied with the rear yard setback, as Mr. Mayor indicated, he could build with 0 setback. But the applicant chose not to comply with the zoning bylaw. And when you come for a variance, you open yourself up to the four tests of Planning Act. Like Mr. O'Hare said, the existing zoning bylaws allow things that can be done, and we constantly see that the zoning bylaw, in any zone, any particular zone, allows you to build something that's not, consistent with the surrounding neighborhood. And that's what the bylaw allows, and if you comply with the bylaw, you can do that. But when you apply for a minor variance, you open yourself up to the four tests, which includes, in the case, the example I'm giving, do you conform with the official plan? And the official plan's got very clear policies about conformity. So in this case, as you reduce the size of the unit, you could build it. It's an undesirable situation, as Mr. O'Hare said, but the bylaw allows that. But you're in front of the committee asking for a variance, and you've opened up the application to the test of desirability. And I think that's the problem that I'm having, and I believe the chair is having, is that, and there's an option that could have resolved this. So I don't think the fact that the zoning bylaw allows you to build to zero is enough to meet the four tests of the Planning Act, because you've opened yourself up to desirability. And I tend to agree with Mr. O'Hare that the zero setback is not desirable. And to echo the chair, it's unfortunate your client didn't take the town up on its offer to redesign this to a more appropriate solution.
My comments on that matter are that if we shrink the unit, it results in from 9'8" by 58 centimeters. So that's a 7 foot deep, 7 foot projection addition on the back of the property. And should we do that, the exact same issues that are posed as a problem by planning exist. There's still 0 yard setback. There's still all the existing issues. And moving forward, the 58 centimeters isn't a lot to ask, essentially. The build is physically appealing. It suits the nature of a couple that have been living in Oakville their entire lives. They want to stay in the neighborhood. They purchased the house with the hope of being able to build this addition. And essentially, that 58 centimeters, if we reduce by 58 centimeters, all the problems that planning has still exist. And this discussion was had with the clients. Ultimately, they made the choice to approach committee to request the space that they can use for their home art studio.
Okay, any further comments from the committee members, items of clarification before we take the matter into committee? Okay, I see none. Has anyone called with interest for this application, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
No, Madam Chair, there have been no calls.
Very well. Who would like to move a motion? Go ahead, Mr. Tulowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I think I've explained my rationale. I understand the applicant could turn around tomorrow and put in a building permit application complying with the zoning bylaw, but he did not choose to do that, chose to come to the committee, and the committee has 4 very distinct tests, and I do not see how that it passed the desirable test in this situation. And so as a result, Madam Chair, I'm going to move the application be denied, and I encourage the applicant to go back and talk to staff and take them up on their offer with the new application if they don't want to submit a building permit application that complies. I would note, Madam Chair, that there was a letter of objection, although it gave no reasons for what that objection was, so it doesn't factor into my decision.
Okay, is there discussion on this recommendation? Okay, I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been denied, none opposed. Have a good night. Application CAV 172 of 2024 at 147 Elmwood Road. Again, that's CAV 172 of 2024 at 147 Elmwood Road. I have Christine Deng here as the agent.
Good evening, my name is Christine Deng, the agent of 147.
Go ahead.
Yeah. The proposal is to build a new two-story dwelling on the existing lot. The application was previously deferred from June 12 hearing and approved at the hearing on September 4th. However, the planning department raised concerns believing that the proposed dwelling was oversized for the property, which led the town to appeal the decision on Ontario Land Tribunal. We have engaged in extensive consultations with the planning department and made several revisions to the proposal to address their concerns. The first slide shows the front rendering of the proposed dwelling, which has been designed to complement the character of the surrounding neighborhood. Can I have the next slide, please? In this slide, the yellow area represents the existing sewer easement. The red dash lines indicates the required setbacks from each property line. Although there is limited space for the proposed dwelling, we have made sure to position the house in such way that it doesn't encroach upon the easement and require setback. Next slide, please. To remove the side yard setback variance, we have put in the north side wall at the garage to be 1.2 meters from the property line, as highlighted in red on the first floor plan. Next slide, please. The orange area shows the reduced footprint at the second floor. This area is designed as inaccessible flat roof, and we have only proposed one window at the second floor bathroom facing the north property. I believe there won't be any overlooking issue. Additionally, to maintain the approved 46.6% residential floor area in the last hearing, we have removed the double ceiling from the previous design, shown in green on the floor plan, and slightly increased the length of the house from 1.34 meters to have more comfortable living space for the family. Although the RFA remains unchanged, the overall massing of the house has been reduced effectively, and planning department is satisfied with the modification. We don't have any setback and height variance, and only asking an additional 27.5 square meters floor area. I believe our proposal is minor in nature. Thank you for consideration, and I will be happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you. Are there any questions or items of clarification of the applicant? I see none. Has there been any calls with respect to this application, Secretary Treasurer?
No, Madam Chair, no calls.
And I do recognize that there were 4 letters of support from Shiv Sudan, Gina and Robert Ferguson, Robert Beamish, and Brian Tucker, neighboring properties. Let's take the matter into committee. Who would like to move a motion? Go ahead, Mr. Talowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I believe I moved the original motion of approval on this, and the majority of the committee agreed in looking at the application that's before us. The variances from the original have been reduced, and obviously to the satisfaction of staff. So when applying the four tests, I find that this application would be even more compatible and with the zoning bylaw and meeting the four tests of the Planning Act. So I'd be pleased to move approval of this application, subject to the two conditions that the dwelling be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevations dated October 1st, 2024, and that the approval expires within 2 years of the decision if a building permit hasn't been issued.
Very well. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay. The application has been approved, none opposed. Thank you. Have a good night. Good evening. I believe the next application is the one that Mr. Tulowski has a conflict in. Okay, then that's application CAV 173 of 2024 at 2318 Bennington Gate. Again, that's CAV 173 of 2024 at 2318 Bennington Gate.
Sorry, Madam Chair.
I apologize. I think I read the letters of support for this application with the last one.
Yeah,
That's correct, Madam Chair.
And Madam Chair,
I apologize for that.
Madam Chair, I have to bring Member Tulowski back as well.
Okay.
It's for the next application that he has a conflict.
Oh, okay, that's 174. I don't know what's happening. I apologize. I think my eyes have gone cross-eyed.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee.
Good evening, Mr. Nelson. Just wait for a second as we bring Mr. Tulowski back, because I inadvertently booted him out on the wrong application.
Oh dear.
Michael, I'm so sorry. I read 173 versus 174, although I have it clearly written in front of me, but my eyes had something else to say about it.
It's all right, Madam Chair. We'll just wait for Mr. Tulowski to reappear magically.
Okay, so I made two errors. I called the letters of support for the last application, Elmwood, and those letters of support were actually for Bennington Gate, so I apologize for that.
No
and then go ahead, Mr. Nelson. It's CAV 173 for 2318 Bennington Gate, and the letters of support, you have 4 letters of support, which I just led into the record, are actually for your application. So go ahead, sir.
That's correct, Madam Chair. The application before you this evening is for an increase in residential floor area ratio from 29% to 31%. The application is specific to the southwest corner of the building that is currently under construction. There is a roof over that area, but there are no walls. It was during the COVID session a few years ago that the owners of the property determined that rather than having a roof over a porch, it might be nice to carry forward with a sunroom and office space in that. And so they did conclude very, very recently that that was a desirable thing to do. So that is what is before you this evening. You probably have seen my covering letter in which I reviewed the official plan policy to section 11.1.6, and staff have reviewed a similar section of the official plan. I think we've come to the same conclusion that the application is in conformity with the official plan. I think the intent and general purpose of the zoning bylaw is to regulate massing and size of the building. And since this is an area of the building that currently has a roof on it, there is no change in the massing of the building. The in terms of impact on the community, I see that there is nothing. There's nothing from the private lane. Obviously, it's at the rear of the building, and there is a wooden fence along the rear of the property that protects the people who have frontage on Cameo. That concludes my presentation, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Any questions or items of clarification? Okay, I see none. We'll take the matter into committee if there's no one with interest to speak to this application, Madam Secretary Treasurer.
No, Madam Chair, no calls.
Okay. Who would like to move a motion? Go ahead, Mr. Dickey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Based on my review of the owner's application, site plan, the building elevation, site visit, presentation by the owner's consultant, was planning staff report, together with the support by the neighbors, I am satisfied that the variances are minor in nature and conform to the 4 tests under the Planning Act. And I put forth a motion that the application as applied for be approved, subject to the conditions that the dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the submitted site plan dated August 13, 2024, and elevation drawings dated 17/02/27. Oh, I see. February. Okay, 27. Something's wrong with that number. Am I right? Or?
Yes, I think that architect has a strange way of numbering plans. It's a very recent drawing, Madam Chair. It's a revision to the set of drawings that was submitted for the building permit.
Okay. So is that the correct reference? Because that's 27.
Yeah, the drawing would have been done in November of this year.
So this number is not the date then?
Yeah, can you bring up the site plan, not the site plan, the floor plan, ground floor plan? It should have a date on that drawing.
Madam Chair, if I may, so the discrepancy isn't with the site plan, it's actually with the elevation. Mr. Nelson, it would appear that the architect did use the October 2022 elevation sheet. However, they provided a revision, but that revision is in fact dated 17/02/27. Which I imagine is a typo, perhaps more reflective of 2024. But it is the October 2022 elevation drawings that were incorporated into the submission package.
Thank you, Kate.
Okay, we've noted that for the decision. Mr. Dickey, you have a question?
Oh, no, I didn't do that. I was just going to finish up that the
okay, go ahead.
2-year condition. But we solved the situation about the date on that, the elevation. Okay, that the approval, to continue with my second condition, sorry, that the approval expires 2 years from the date of decision if a building permit is not being issued for the proposed construction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dickey. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? Mr. Hardcastle.
Could I offer a friendly amendment? I'm not particularly keen on quoting a date that's clearly incorrect. Perhaps we could make reference to the elevation drawings submitted in support of this application, or some reference similar to that. Thank you.
I thought we were going to point to the October 2022 elevations. Did I misunderstand?
Maybe I misunderstood, Madam Chair.
Ms. Cockburn?
I'm wondering, Madam Chair, if we could reference the drawings submitted in November of 2024.
Okay, so then we go back to Mr. Hardcastle's amendment that's the drawings submitted with this application.
Correct.
If I may offer an additional comment, only because the elevations don't reflect any dates in 2024. The site plan is fine. It's the elevation that is of issue. So may I offer a suggestion that the approval be in accordance with the elevations dated October 2022 as revised in support of the application.
Okay, I'm okay with that as a condition in terms of wording. Are you okay with that, Mr. Hardcastle? You're muted.
If you give me a moment, please. I would like to understand what the elevation drawings that were provided to me to review say in terms of dates. I'm confused by the conversation as it's gone back around, so I'd like to just pull those drawings back up, and I unfortunately have lost them somewhere on my desktop here.
That's okay. Take your time.
Madam Chair, I think Mr. Hardcastle would like to see that drawing up on the screen again. If we could ask the staff to push that back up.
That's okay, Mr. Nelson. I now have it, and I would concur with the suggestion of staff.
Okay, thank you. All right, so Madam Secretary Treasurer, do you want to read what you have on hand so there's no confusion before we actually vote on the motion?
Yeah, for condition number 1, I have the dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the submitted site plan dated August 13th, 2024, and elevation drawings dated October 2022 as revised in support of the application.
Very well. Everyone in agreement? Great. All those in support of the application with set conditions? Okay, so the application has been approved, none opposed.
Thank you, Madam Chair,
Mr. Nelson.
and members of the committee.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and happy holidays.
Yes, and to you as well.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Thalski. This time it is your time to leave. Alrighty then. Application CAV 174 of 41 at 412 Silver Maple Road. Again, this is CAV 174 of 2024 at 412 Silver Maple Road.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
How are you?
Good. How are you, Mr. Palmieri? Go ahead.
Doing well, thank you. This application, I'll keep it short and sweet. It's to permit the reduction of parking space dimensions located in the underground at the 8-story apartment building that's been constructed. I can answer, there's a 5 on the P1 level and 3 on the P2 level. If there's any questions, I can definitely answer them. Or if you want more clarification, I can provide that as well.
What is the purpose of the reduction?
The columns. So when you enter the parking space, it's the front column when you enter the parking space. For section 5.413, for the unit 54, unit 55, unit 58 in level A, and unit 58 and 59 in level B, and under section 5.4.1.3, where there is a barrier free minimum width of 2.9, we have 3 that are non-compliant.
And I'm assuming that this will all be communicated in the condominium agreement for the purchasers.
Correct. So this was a last minute oversight. So this will be all corrected and updated. I see the plan I've been dealing with in Delia. So I think they've been updating it on their end as well. And I've made note of it as well to them, just to give them a heads up.
Any questions, Mr. Premier, at this time? Go ahead, Mr. Dickey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Here I am again referring back to things we've done in the past. And my recollection, I looked into it, there was a similar situation for an apartment building done in the area of Dundas and Browning Road. And in that approval of that situation, we added a pair of conditions. And I would like to consider adding those pair of conditions to this application. Just read what we added before, and it was that the owner agrees to place a notification in all offers of purchase and sale or equivalent, advising prospective purchasers that parking space unit numbers, we listed the numbers, are deficient in size and may not be suitable for all vehicle types. And then the other different condition was that the owner provide confirmation that the condominium declaration has been updated to specifically identify all substandard parking spaces to the satisfaction of the town. To me, they make a lot of sense, but I would ask anybody to...
No, but I agree with you, and actually staff has included them in the recommended conditions that we have for this application this evening. So...
Oh. Okay, I'm sorry.
You got all riled up, I see it coming.
Why did you got me interrupting earlier?
I let you have it, Mr. Dickey. Let the record show.
You were on a roll, Stuart.
That's why I wanted to pick one. You had 2 minutes. Okay.
It's not easy not to reflect on past applications, and I will go on the record to say that. But you know, we have to walk a very careful line, you know, because each application in front of us is warranted our own set of eyes. But in this situation, they all agreed with you.
Okay. Sorry, folks.
Anything else? Have there been any calls, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
No, Madam Chair, no calls.
Okay, very well. Then we'll take the matter into committee. If no one has any questions, who would like to move a motion? Go ahead, Mr. Dickey. Go ahead. It's exactly what you want, so go ahead.
Okay, sorry, folks. Thank you, Madam Chair. Based upon my review of the owner's application and the plans submitted, together by site visit, the presentation by the owner's consultant and the planning staff, I am satisfied that the variances are minor in nature and conform to the 4 tests under the Planning Act, and I put forth a motion that the application is applied for be approved subject to the conditions that the parking spaces be permitted in general accordance with the site plan and draft plan of condominium, draft plan of condominium plans submitted with the application, that the owner agrees to place a notification in all offers of purchase and sale or equivalent, advising prospective purchasers that the parking spaces are deficient in size and may not be suitable for certain vehicles, that the owner provide confirmation that the condominium declaration is being updated to specifically identify all substandard parking spaces to the satisfaction of the town, and that the approval expires 2 years from the date of this decision.
Very well, thank you. All those in support of this application and set conditions? Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed.
Thank you very much.
Have a good evening.
You as well.
Hello, Mr. Tulowski. Okay, our last item on our agenda is CV 139 of 2024, deferred from October the 2nd of 2024 at 208 Donsel Drive. Again, it's CV 139 of 2024 at 208 Donsel Drive. I do recognize that we have 8 letters of support from surrounding neighbors: Jordan and Ashley Butler, Jennifer Shurig, Kate Hayes, Shabir Hashimi, Shida Lee, Chad Maldonor, Anand D'Souza, Tanya Bex D'Souza. Hope I've read them all correctly. Good evening, Ms. Medviva. Go ahead.
Just before we get going, just to make sure that Wayne Squadron is also promoted to panelists, please.
Yes, I'm here.
Perfect, thank you. All right, so without further ado, for the public record, my name is Stephanie Matviva, Glenshire & Associates, the registered agent on behalf of the owner. I'm joined here tonight by Wayne Squadron, the architect for the project, to provide a further explanation of the proposal and the variances. If I could have the next slide, please. Thank you. The site before us tonight is municipally known as 208 Donsel Drive. It's outlined in red on the screen. The site is located on the west side of Donsel Drive. It's located within an established neighborhood of the town. The neighborhood can be understood as having an eclectic character, given there is a mixture of older, historic, and newer built forms of varying sizes and styles. It also highlights that there is a modern architecture-inspired home north of the subject lands off of Donsel Drive. If I could have the next slide, please. The proposal before us tonight is for a 2-story replacement dwelling. This triggers the need for 8 variances, which generally are related to an increased private garage area, increased private garage width, reduced setbacks, increased lot coverage, increased residential floor area or RFA, and increased building depth. If I could have the next slide, please. This is just a graphic representation of the proposal and generally the location of the variances. Just highlight that although not graphically depicted, the requested lot coverage variance also relate to the roof overhang of the rear yard cabana structure. With that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Wayne to provide further detail on the proposal and the variances requested.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Wayne Squadron. I will speak to the unique architectural design of this proposal and also get into more of the specifics of the requested variances. For designs such as the one before you tonight, we find that seeing it in 3 dimensions can be very informative. Next slide, please. In this slide, the proposed design is viewed from the southeast. I'd like to point to the front facade, which features clear ground level elements. This echoes the build form of the neighboring historic dwellings. These ground level elements serve to visually reduce the appearance of adverse mass and scale by breaking down the volume of the building. The second level is recessed from the front building face by 3 meters. This view also describes a significant setback of the mid portion of the side of the building and the absence of windows facing the northern neighbors. Next slide, please. This is a view from the southeast. In this image, you can see the vehicular entry to the garage, which is purposefully located facing the side yard to avoid having garage doors on the front facade. This view also shows the only side-facing window, which is located towards the street. This, together with robust landscaping and privacy fencing, effectively eliminates the potential for privacy and overlook concerns for both neighboring properties. Next slide, please. This is a view from the southwest. In this image, you are seeing the rear facade of the proposed design. Similar to the street or front facade, the ground level is a clear 1-story element with a recessed second level. In this view, you are also seeing the conforming accessory building, as well as a covered outdoor area at the north side of the ground floor. I would also like to point out the chimney on the south side, which is conceived as an important architectural feature.
Next slide, please. I will use this image and the following diagrams to graphically describe the requested variances. In this image, the areas shown in green represent the portions of the design for which we are seeking variances. The first item is the portion of the second level and chimney which encroach into the side yard. You can see that there are large sections of the ground floor which have a significantly greater setback than required. This view also identifies the location of the garage entry, which is located under the cantilevered second floor. Lastly, you can see a wedge-shaped portion of the one-story front facade element. The requested front yard setback is reflective of the site's unique lot pattern in that Dineso Drive is angled, meaning that the minimum front yard setback is not a uniform line that is parallel to the street. The requested setback relates only to a segment of the ground level and does not conform to the front yard setback. Next slide, please. In this image, we are identifying the portions of the design that do not conform with the north side setback line. They consist of a portion of the one-story section at the front of the structure and a portion of the rear two-story section of the structure. You can see that the central section of the facade is set back significantly behind the stipulated setback line, effectively mitigating any adverse impacts along this side of the building. Next slide, please. In this image, we are identifying the portions of the design that do not conform with the maximum allowable building depth. The areas of nonconformance are almost exclusively the rear section of the one-story element, with only a sliver of the northern section of the rear wall of the two-story element. I want to note that the second story as a whole has a building depth of 16.5 at its deepest point, far less than the maximum allowed 20 meters. This image also highlights the areas contributing to the requested coverage. As committee is aware, the bylaw requires that lot coverage include areas containing walkout basement access, covered porches, porticos, and large roof overhangs. In this proposal, this includes the exterior areas under the accessory structure roof, the covered porch on the north side of the ground floor, the walkout basement access stair, and the area outside of the garage doors. In total, these areas account for 105 square meters, or 6.6% of lot coverage. Next slide, please. This image shows the subject property and the two adjacent neighbors. The first point that I'd like to make is that the existing structures on the property are situated at or closer to the side lot lines than our design proposes. The second point relates to the planning rationale behind the proposed front yard setback. The dashed red line represents the average setback of the existing adjacent homes. Our proposed front building face is in line with this average, creating a consistent building setback along the three properties. And with that, I will yield back to Stephanie.
Thanks, Wayne. Next slide, please. This is just a graphic representation of the various surrounding decisions that were reviewed in the immediate surrounding context. So overall, there are instances of committee approval for increased private garage area, reduced side yard setbacks, reduced front yard setbacks, increased lot coverage, increased residential floor area, and increased building depth. So the proposal contemplates private garage area, side yard setbacks, a lot coverage, and dwelling depth that are within range of these previous approvals. But if I could have the next slide, please. So just to summarize, as outlined in the submission letter provided in support of this application, it remains our opinion that the proposal meets the four tests under the Planning Act. The proposal also serves to respect and maintain the established neighborhood character through the high-quality built form and built form features that are contemplated. With that, we're happy to answer any questions that there may be. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Questions, items of clarification. Go ahead, Mr. Talowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Couple of questions. The 8 letters of support, I haven't mapped them. Do they include the neighbors on both sides and across the street?
For you, Madam Chair, yes, they do. They do include the immediate adjacent neighbors as well as other neighbors both on Denesel Drive to the north and south.
Thank you. And Mr. Squadron, really appreciate that presentation. That helped a lot, especially that wider view with the front yard setbacks. Is it fair to, and I won't put words in your mouth, but summarize your presentation that, well, on matters of compliance with the zoning bylaw, you may not comply, but it is in line with the other houses, and that the other houses adjacent also don't comply with the current zoning standards with respect to setback?
Yeah, it's fair to say that the side yard setbacks for sure do not comply with the current zoning bylaws.
Thank you.
Ms. McPhail.
Thank you, Chair. Just to the member and to clarify comments made about the letters that were in support, I have mapped those letters. There were 8 of them, and they weren't the immediate neighbors, neither the adjacent neighbors to the north or south, and nor to the west. So the rear yard neighbors and the immediate adjacent neighbors on the west side of Donesel did not submit any letters in support or opposition.
Ms. Maviva, do you care to clarify?
It's a mischaracterization, so I do apologize. That was the message relayed to me. But again, just to confirm, effort was made to approach all the immediate surrounding neighbors. So conversations were had with the immediate adjacent neighbors. As committee may be aware, in advance of the previous hearing, similarly, conversations were had. Those immediate neighbors did not write a letter of support nor opposition.
Any further questions or comments or items of clarification? Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this is directed towards the applicant. Through the presentation, you spoke about the setbacks significantly. A big component of this is the residential floor area. This is a significant increase in the size of the building. A little over 1,800 square feet, if I'm calculating correctly, or a 10% increase. To what degree do you see that impacts the perception of massing when read in concert with the additional increases, the side yard setbacks, or sorry, reductions, I should say, in side yard setbacks, front yard, etc., in terms of fitting in with the character of the area? I'd like to hear just a little bit more detail on that.
Definitely, you can take that, or would like me to?
So as mentioned during the presentation, there are clear ground story elements, so not to get out of my depth here. But there's many ways and there's many approaches in terms of how to effectively mitigate or manage the appearance of mass and scale, especially when it comes to residential floor area. So if it would be helpful, we can certainly pull the presentation back up. There's different ways of having clear ground story elements, undulating facade. There's different strategies that can be effectively mitigated. So great effort and care and planning was undertaken in advancing this proposal, designing it in a way that effectively mitigated the appearance of mass and scale. So that includes the generous setback above the ground story element, which is a feature consistent with other newer and historic dwellings within the immediate surrounding neighborhood. So I hear your point. we have to look at it in totality. There's many components to the proposal, but that is just one of many ways that effort was undertaken to try and balance the various aspects of the proposal, trying to balance the reduced side yard setbacks, which again, there's precedent within the surrounding area, but to effectively mitigate and manage the appearance of mass and scale.
Anything further? Okay. Has anyone called with interest for this application, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
No, Madam Chair, no calls.
Okay. If there are no further questions of the applicant, we'll take the matter into committee. Who would like to start the discussion? Okay, I see you need a few minutes. Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will start the conversation here. The subject application is significant both in terms of size and number of variances. The key indicators of massing and character are being addressed with variances here in front of us this evening. Side yards, both sides, front yard, gross floor area coverage, all of and some of these variances, in particular the gross floor area, which, as you can gather from my previous questions, is of significant concern to me, particularly when read in concert with the other variances that are being sought. Well, I see that there were efforts undertaken to attempt to break down the massing. The reality is that this is a significantly larger building than we see in the area. Those efforts, I don't believe, go far enough in terms of this. I think the numbers, the number of variances, the cumulative impact spoken to by staff in the report, they are significant. The cumulative impact just cannot get me past the four tests. I do not believe this is consistent with the established character of the area. I don't believe it is consistent with the intent of the zoning bylaw nor of the official plan. And I don't believe that this is minor in nature. Accordingly, I will put forward a motion to refuse the application before us.
Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Is there discussion on this recommendation? Mr. Talowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a difficult one. The presentation convinced me that the issues of depth and front yard setback, when viewed in the totality of the frontages on the adjacent lots are no longer a concern to me. But I think, like Mr. Hardcastle, just have this sense that it's just a little too big. It would have, I guess I would have hoped that the time and the deferral would have been used to maybe just tweak a few things with staff. But I guess, like Mr. Hardcastle, it's not the size, it's not the massing that I'm struggling with. It's really, I guess it's the massing of the reductions of the side yards that I think need a little bit of work, from my opinion.
Okay. Anything further? Mr. Dickey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll put in my 2 cents worth, I guess. You're asking for side yard setbacks, even though you have a lot that's 100 feet wide. Like you think you have lots of room that you can find with side yard setback. You're asking for a front yard setback, even though your lot is, I think it's 58 or 53 meters. 53 meters deep. Seems that. Wonder why you couldn't have moved the house back, whatever. You just haven't mentioned your residential floor area, 39.8%, is much larger than the permitted 29%. And the house at 646 square meters would be 37% greater than what the zoning bylaw would allow at 468 square meters. Plus you have a garage that's bigger. I don't have a problem with the fact that the garage is bigger, but that adds to the mass of the house. And when you're already at 39%, the mass of the house is increased by that over surface into the garage. Why? At this point, those items up that concern me.
I think we're all in agreement here. The recommendation before us is to deny the application as not meeting the four tests and overall massing. All those in support? Okay. The application has been denied, none opposed.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Have a good evening. Good night. We have minutes to confirm from November the 27th. Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. And we have, I'd like a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. We are adjourned at 8:43.